3 cycles ago, I watched 12 young beings walk into the Crimson Maw jungle. Only one walked out. That one was human. My name is Commander Vorth Kane of the Galactic Education Consortium, and I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about what I witnessed on planet Sirion 7. The brass wanted a routine survival assessment. Standard procedure for new species joining our alliance. Send in their brightest students. See how they handle a Class 9 Deathworld. Document the casualties. File the report. Simple. The humans had just been granted provisional membership after their spectacular victory over the hegemony forces. Cocky little primates. They were always grinning, always making jokes, always acting like death was some kind of amusing inconvenience. High Command figured the jungle would humble them real quick. We should have known better. The transport ship Nexus Dawn dropped us into orbit around Sirion 7 on a gray morning that tasted like copper and regret. Through the viewport, the planet looked like a festering wound against the void. Crimson vegetation stretched endlessly across 3 continents, interrupted only by black rivers that ran like infected veins through the landscape. The atmospheric readings made my scales itch just looking at them. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Dr. Elena Torres, the human expedition leader. She stood beside me, barely reaching my shoulder, yet somehow managing to look down at the planet with something that might have been affection. "Reminds me of the Amazon back home if the Amazon wanted to murder you every second of every day." I flexed my claws against the deck plating. "Dr. Torres, perhaps you don't fully comprehend the danger index of this world. The survival rate for trained military personnel is approximately 12%. For students, it drops to 0.3%, she finished, still smiling. "Yeah, we read the briefing. Exciting, right?" The other alien observers exchanged glances. Sub-Commander Rax Hollow of the Tekari Imperium clicked his mandibles in what I recognized as deep concern. "Commander Kaneen, perhaps we should reconsider this evaluation." The human students appeared to be enthusiastic about the prospect of certain death. Through the observation deck windows, we could see the 12 human students in the preparation bay. They were laughing. Actually laughing while checking equipment that would almost certainly fail to save their lives. One of them, a lanky male with sandy hair named Jake Mitchell, was juggling 3 emergency ration packs while his teammates cheered. "They're children," whispered Dr. Yuma Frost, our xenobiologist. Her tentacles curled with anxiety. "Look at them. They have no idea what awaits in that jungle." "Oh, they know," Dr. Torres said, her voice carrying a strange mix of pride and sadness. "Humans always know when they're walking into hell. We just do it anyway." The briefing room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. On the main screen, detailed scans of the Crimson Maw scrolled past, predator classifications that read like a nightmare catalog. The razor-wing hunters with their diamond-hard talons, the mind-crawler vines that could override nervous systems, the blood mist spores that dissolved organic matter from the inside out. And those were just the documented threats. "The objective is simple," I announced, trying to maintain professional composure. "Survive 72 hours in the designated zone. Extract at grid coordinates Sigma-7 for pickup. Any questions?" A human girl named Amy Chen raised her hand. She looked maybe 20 standard years old, with bright eyes and a smile that somehow made the room feel warmer. "Commander Kine, sir. What's the record for fastest extraction?" 47 hours, 19 minutes, I replied. "Set by a Vordak Special Forces team 3 years ago. They lost 6 members in the process." "Cool," Amy said, making notes on her datapad. "We're shooting for under 24 hours. The alien observers erupted in chittering protests. Dr. Yina's tentacles writhed frantically. "That's impossible. The terrain alone would require days to navigate, and that's assuming perfect conditions with no hostile encounters." Jake Mitchell looked up from where he was now balancing a field knife on his nose. "Hi, Dr. Frost. With respect, you're thinking like prey. Humans don't really do that whole avoiding predators thing. We're more of a become the scariest thing in the jungle species." "Preposterous," huffed Sub-Commander Hollow. "The biological data clearly indicates humans are omnivores, with minimal natural weaponry. No armor plating, no venom, No electromagnetic discharge capabilities. You're essentially hairless mammals with delusions of adequacy. The humans exchanged looks and burst into laughter. Not nervous laughter. Genuine deep-belly laughter that somehow managed to sound both innocent and terrifying. Dr. Torres patted my arm with surprising gentleness. "Commander, may I suggest we proceed with the drop? I think you'll find this educational for all parties involved." 2 hours later, we watched the drop pods streak through Zerion 7's atmosphere like falling stars. The humans had packed light, too light, according to every survival manual in the known galaxy, while other species would have brought heavy weapons, environmental suits, and portable shelters. The humans carried mostly food, water, basic tools, and something they called emergency chocolate. "This is madness," Dr. Yuna whispered as we tracked their descent. "They'll be dead within 6 hours. The pods landed in a clearing roughly 3 kilometers from the jungle's edge. Standard protocol called for a cautious approach, extensive reconnaissance, and careful preparation. The humans were out of their pods and jogging toward the tray line within 15 minutes. "Contact established," crackled Jake Mitchell's voice over the comm. "Crimson Maw looks pretty gnarly from here. We can see about 50 different species of plants that want to eat us. And something that looks like a cross between a bear and a chainsaw is watching us from behind that big red tree." "That would be a ripper beast," I transmitted back. "Highly aggressive predator. Recommend immediate evasive action." "Copy that, Command. Amy's going to make friends with it." The next transmission was Amy Chen's voice, bright and cheerful. "Hey there, gorgeous. Aren't you just the prettiest murder machine I've ever seen?" Through the drone feeds, we watched in horrified fascination as the small human female approached a creature that could have ripped apart a Vortak warrior in seconds. The Ripper beast snarled, displaying teeth like obsidian daggers and claws that could slice through starship hull plating. Amy pulled out an emergency ration pack and tossed it near the creature's feet. "I bet you're hungry, aren't you? This tastes like cardboard, but it's got lots of protein." The Ripper beast sniffed the ration pack, then fixed its 6 red eyes on Amy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature settled back on its haunches and began eating the ration pack, wrapper and all. "Well," Submander Hollow said faintly, "that's unexpected. First rule of human survival strategy," Dr. Torres explained, somehow managing to sound both proud and concerned. "When in doubt, try making friends. If that doesn't work, then we get creative." The drone feeds showed the rest of the human team moving through the jungle with disturbing confidence. They identified edible plants with casual expertise, avoided obvious traps with instinctive grace, and seemed to treat every life-threatening encounter as an opportunity for scientific curiosity. "Look at this fungus," transmitted a student named Marcus Webb. "The spore patterns suggest it's probably hallucinogenic. I'm going to taste it." "Marcus." "No," came Dr. Torres's voice over the comm. "Marcus." "Yes," he replied cheerfully. What followed was a 20-minute period where Marcus narrated his psychedelic experience, while fighting off what he described as rainbow tentacle monsters that smell like my grandmother's cooking. His teammates took turns keeping him alive while he provided what was arguably the most detailed xenobiological survey of Mindcrawler vine neural toxins ever recorded. By hour 6, when other species would have been establishing defensive positions and rationing supplies, the humans had covered nearly 30 kilometers of hostile terrain. They'd cataloged 47 new species, established friendly relations with 3 apex predators, and somehow turned a blood-mist spore colony into what Jake described as the galaxy's most dangerous aromatherapy session. "This is not possible," Dr. Yuna insisted, all 4 of her eyes glued to the monitoring screens. "The toxicity levels alone should have killed them 3 times over." "Dr. Torres," I said slowly, "what exactly did you tell your students about this evaluation?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried an odd mixture of affection and something that might have been regret. "I told them the truth, Commander. I told them they were going to the most dangerous place in known space, and they probably wouldn't all come back. And they volunteered anyway. They fought each other for the privilege." Hour 12 brought the first real crisis. The team had reached what our maps designated as the Crimson Heart, a section of jungle so hostile that previous expeditions had simply marked it as inadvisable for organic life. This was where the truly dangerous predators lived. This was where expeditions went to die. The drone feeds showed twisted trees that moved with predatory intent, pools of liquid that hissed and bubbled with corrosive hunger, and shapes in the shadows that defied classification. The air itself seemed thick with malevolent purpose. "Well," Jake's voice crackled over the comm, "this place is significantly more metal than the brochure suggested." "Team 2, recommend finding alternate route," I transmitted. "Threat assessment indicates near certain fatality rates for that region." "Negative." "Command?" replied Amy Chen. "We're picking up some kind of structure in there. Looks artificial. We're going to check it out." What happened next would haunt my dreams for cycles to come. The structure was indeed artificial. Ancient, alien, and clearly designed by something with a very different understanding of physics and biology than anything in our databases. It rose from the jungle floor like a twisted spear of black metal and organic growth, pulsing with a sickly light that hurt to look at directly. "Okay," Marcus Webb's voice carried a note of scientific excitement that made my scales crawl. "I'm reading energy signatures that don't match any known technology. Also, there's something moving inside that thing. Something big." "Abort," I ordered. "Return to extraction point immediately." "Can't do that, Commander," Amy replied. "There are life signs in there. Looks like survivors from previous expeditions. We're going in." The next 3 hours played out like a fever dream. The humans entered the structure and encountered what our sensors could only describe as biologically impossible. The readings made no sense. Energy spikes that should have been lethal. Gravitational anomalies that defied explanation. And through it all, the calm, professional voices of 12 young humans narrating their progress like they were on a nature walk. "So apparently this place is some kind of automated prison," Jake reported. "The good news is we found the survivors. The bad news is they're being slowly digested by the walls while their consciousness is harvested. I'm going to say intent purposes because that's less horrifying than the alternatives. Beginning rescue operations," Amy added. Marcus found the control interface. "Turns out the whole thing responds to emotional resonance patterns. Specifically, it feeds on fear and despair." There was a pause that lasted exactly 17 seconds. "I know because I counted them." "Well," Marcus said cheerfully, "good thing humans are too stupid to stay scared." What followed was a masterclass in applied human insanity. They turned a rescue mission into something that resembled a combination of demolition work, impromptu psychological therapy, and what Jake later described as the galaxy's most dangerous game of charades. They freed 17 survivors from 6 different expeditions spanning the last decade. They dismantled a technology that had been harvesting sentient consciousness for possibly thousands of years, and they did it all while cracking jokes and comparing the experience to something called Tuesday back home. "Structure neutralized," Amy reported as the alien installation collapsed into harmless rubble. "All survivors accounted for and stable. We're heading for extraction with a slight detour to grab some of those purple fruits we saw earlier. They smell amazing, and Jake bet Marcus he wouldn't try one." "I will absolutely try one," Marcus replied. "For science." Hour 18 brought us to the extraction point early. Too early. I stared at the monitoring screens in disbelief as 12 human students emerged from the jungle looking like they'd been on a pleasant hike rather than a journey through hell. They were laughing, comparing notes, and apparently arguing about whether the purple fruits tasted more like cosmic strawberries or enlightenment with a hint of citrus. Behind them walked something that made every alien observer in the room take an involuntary step backward. It was massive, easily 3 meters tall and built like a living weapon, 6 legs that moved with predatory grace, armor plating that looked like it could stop starship weapons, a head that featured too many teeth and eyes that burned with primal intelligence. According to our databases, it was a Crimson Maw alpha tiger, an apex predator so dangerous that most species considered them mythological. Amy Chen was scratching behind its ears. "Oh hey, Command," she said brightly as the extraction ship descended. "Meet Buster. We found him caught in some kind of energy snare near the structure. Poor guy was scared and hurt, so we patched him up. Turns out he's just a big softy who likes belly rubs and sharing fruit." The creature, this living engine of destruction that could have soloed a military platoon, was indeed sharing fruit with the humans. It would delicately accept pieces from their hands with what could only be described as polite gratitude. "Dr. Torres," I said weakly, "I believe I need to file a very unusual report." She smiled that same warm, somehow terrifying smile she'd worn at the beginning of this nightmare. "Oh, Commander, this is just Tuesday for humans. Wait until you see what we do when we're actually trying." The extraction went smoothly. Too smoothly. The humans boarded with their rescue victims, their alien pet, and enough biological samples to keep xenobiologists busy for decades. They were already making plans for their next adventure, discussing modifications to their approach and debating whether they should have brought more chocolate. As the transport ship carried us away from Zerion 7, I found myself staring out at the stars and wondering what we'd just witnessed. In 72 hours, 12 human students had accomplished what seasoned military units had failed to achieve in months of careful planning. They'd turned a survival exercise into a rescue mission into a scientific expedition, and a scientific expedition into what could only be described as aggressive friendship. "Commander," Sub-Commander Hollow said quietly, "I think we need to revise our threat assessment of human capabilities." "Oh, you absolutely do," Dr. Torres agreed. "What you just saw was 12 college students on their summer break. Our actual military is significantly more creative." Dr. Yana's tentacles were still twitching with nervous energy. "But how? How did they survive conditions that would kill seasoned warriors? How did they neutralize technology that has baffled our best scientists? How did they turn an apex predator into a companion animal?" Dr. Torres considered this for a moment, then shrugged. "Because they're human, they see something impossible, and their first thought isn't how do we avoid this, it's how do we hug it and make it better." "And if hugging doesn't work?" I asked. Her smile turned sharp. "Then they get creative. And trust me, Commander, you really don't want to see humans get creative." As if to emphasize her point, laughter echoed from the cargo bay where the students were apparently teaching Buster to play some kind of human game involving cards and small explosions. The sound was warm and innocent, and somehow more terrifying than any war cry I'd ever heard. I began drafting my report to High Command, knowing they'd never believe it. How do you explain that humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their tactics, but their absolute refusal to accept that anything is impossible? How do you document a species that treats certain death as a minor inconvenience and responds to cosmic horror with scientific curiosity and snack food? 3 cycles later, I'm still trying to answer those questions. But I know one thing for certain. The galaxy wasn't ready for humanity. Hell, I'm not sure the universe is ready for humanity. And the truly terrifying part, they're just getting started. The emergency council session convened exactly 18 hours after I filed my report. 18 hours for the most powerful beings in the galaxy to read 12 pages of documentation and collectively lose their minds. I stood at attention before the Galactic High Command Assembly, watching as representatives from 47 species argued in 17 different languages about whether humans represented the greatest hope or the greatest threat the galaxy had ever seen. The Arcturian Chancellor was molting stress feathers all over his ceremonial robes. The Keldan Prime Minister had turned 3 shades of purple that I was pretty sure weren't healthy, and High Admiral Grix Thorn of the Void Fleet was grinding his crystalline teeth so hard that sparks were literally flying. "Commander Kane," the Chancellor said, his voice carrying the weight of barely controlled panic, "please tell this assembly that your report contains significant exaggerations." I kept my expression neutral. "Sir, if anything, I understated the events. The humans accomplished their objectives with what could only be described as supernatural efficiency." Admiral Thorne leaned forward, his mechanical implants whirring ominously. "Commander, you're asking us to believe that 12 untrained children succeeded where our best military units have failed repeatedly, that they befriended apex predators, that they dismantled ancient technology with nothing but emotional resonance and snack food." "That's correct, sir." "That's impossible, sir." From the gallery, Dr. Elena Torres cleared her throat politely. The entire assembly turned to stare at the small human woman who had somehow managed to cause a galactic crisis simply by chaperoning a field trip. "Honored delegates," she said with that same warm, terrifying smile, "I believe there may be some confusion about the nature of this evaluation. You seem to think this was some kind of unprecedented achievement for my students. The Chancellor's remaining feathers ruffled with agitation. Dr. Torres, surely you understand the significance of what occurred on Zarian 7. The technological implications alone. Oh, absolutely, she agreed cheerfully. Jake's notes on the consciousness harvesting system are already being reviewed by our xenoarchaeology department. Amy's biological surveys will keep our scientists busy for years. And Marcus is writing his doctoral thesis on practical applications of psychedelic xenobotany in hostile first contact scenarios. Prime Minister Keldon turned another shade of purple. You're treating this like a routine academic exercise. Because it was, Dr. Torres replied. This was a survival assessment, not a military operation. My students approached it exactly as they would any other challenging environment, with curiosity, preparation, and a healthy disregard for the opinions of things trying to kill them. The assembly erupted in chittering protests and translated expletives. I watched High Admiral Thorne's stress indicators spike into the red zone as he processed the implications. Dr. Torres, he said slowly, if this represents routine human capability in extreme environments, what exactly would constitute an actual military operation? Her smile turned sharp. Admiral, I really don't think you want to know. That was when the alarms started screaming. Emergency lights bathed the council chamber in pulsing red as automated voices announced what every being in the room was hoping never to hear. Priority Alpha Alert, hegemony forces detected. Multiple dreadnoughts inbound. Estimated time to fleet engagement 4 hours. The hegemony. The galaxy's greatest nightmare had just decided to crash our little debate about human capabilities. Perfect timing, really. The universe has a sense of humor, and it's usually the kind that gets you killed. High Admiral Thorne was already moving, his command implants interfacing with the station's tactical systems. All fleets to battle stations. Initiate Protocol 7 defensive formations. Contact command and request immediate reinforcement deployment. The holographic displays that materialized around the chamber showed exactly how screwed we were. 17 hegemony dreadnoughts, accompanied by enough support vessels to invade a solar system. Their formations were perfect, their approach vectors calculated with deadly precision, and their weapons hot enough to cook planets. Meanwhile, our defensive fleet consisted of 6 aging patrol cruisers, a handful of scout ships, and whatever personal vessels the delegates had arrived in. In military terms, we were what strategists technically called completely doomed. Estimated defensive capability, announced the tactical AI in a voice that somehow managed to sound apologetic. 12% probability of successful repulsion. Recommendation, immediate evacuation. Chancellor Arcturian shed another handful of feathers. We cannot abandon Nexus Station. The political implications alone would destabilize 3 sectors. Sir, I interjected. With respect, political implications become irrelevant when you're dead. That was when Dr. Torres spoke up again. Admiral Thorne, what's the status of human vessels in this system? The Admiral's implants flickered as he accessed the registry. 1 transport ship, the Meridian Hope. Science vessel configuration. Crew of it says here. Crew of 23 humans plus 12 students plus 17 rescued expedition members plus 1. Ted. That's Buster, Dr. Torres said fondly. He's adapted remarkably well to starship life. Amy's been teaching him to play zero-gravity fetch. Dr. Torres. Prime Minister Keldon interrupted, his color shifting toward panic yellow. This is hardly the time for discussing recreational activities. We're facing imminent annihilation. Are we? She asked. And something in her tone made every being in the chamber go very, very quiet. Admiral, what's the crew complement on a hegemony dreadnought? Admiral Thorne's implants whirred as he pulled up the tactical data. Approximately 8,000? Why do you— Oh yes, Dr. Torres replied, her smile turning positively predatory. Admiral, I believe my students would like to volunteer for active combat duty. What followed was the fastest strategic planning session in galactic military history, not because we were efficient, but because the humans had apparently spent their entire return journey from Zurion 7 developing contingency plans for every possible scenario, including hostile fleet encounter while traveling in a science vessel with minimal armament. The Meridian Hope is equipped with standard defensive arrays, reported Jake Mitchell over the comm, his voice carrying that same cheerful confidence that had gotten them through the Crimson Maw. Nothing fancy. Particle beam turrets, missile pods, basic shielding. Oh, and we've got about 3 tons of those purple fruits from Zerion 7. Admiral Thorne's stress reading spiked again. Student Mitchell, fruit is not typically considered a military asset. Sir, with respect, you haven't tried Marcus's special fruit cocktail. One sip and Amy spent 40 minutes convinced she could communicate with quantum particles, which technically she could. The tactical displays showed the hegemony fleet closing fast. Their lead dreadnought was a kilometer-long monument to destructive engineering, bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon. Its escort vessels moved in formation like a school of metallic predators, sensors sweeping for weaknesses in our defenses. "Contact incoming," announced our communications officer. "The hegemony fleet is hailing us." The main screen flickered and we found ourselves face-to-face with Supreme War Commander Vascadoran, a being whose reputation for cruelty was matched only by his tactical brilliance. His species looked like someone had crossed a spider with a nightmare, and given the result access to military-grade weaponry. "Attention, pathetic delegates of the so-called Galactic Alliance," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute confidence. "You will surrender Nexus Station immediately, or we will demonstrate why the hegemony rules through superior firepower. You have 30 minutes to comply." Chancellor Arcturian stepped forward, his remaining feathers quivering with barely controlled terror. "Supreme Commander, surely we can reach some diplomatic accommodation." "Diplomacy," Commander Duran replied, "is what happens after you've killed everyone who disagrees with you." The transmission cut, leaving us staring at tactical displays that showed 17 dreadnoughts moving into bombardment formation. In 30 minutes, Nexus Station would become an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. "Well," Dr. Torres said thoughtfully, "that was rude." Admiral Thorne turned to her with desperate hope in his optical sensors. "Dr. Torres, if your students have any suggestions for dealing with overwhelming enemy superiority, now would be an excellent time to share them." "Oh, they do," she replied. "But I should probably warn you that human military doctrine differs significantly from standard galactic practice. We tend to be more creative." "Creative how?" Her smile could have powered a small star. "Jake, Amy, you're on speaker. Explain your plan to the nice Admiral." Jake's voice crackled over the comm, bright with enthusiasm. "Right? So Marcus has been analyzing the energy signatures from those hegemony ships, and he's noticed something interesting about their shield configurations. They're optimized for high energy impacts and particle weapons, but they've got a weird resonance frequency that makes them vulnerable to specific wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation." "That's interesting," Admiral Thorne said slowly, "but our ships don't carry weapons capable of exploiting that vulnerability." "True," Amy Chen's voice joined the conversation, "but remember those consciousness-harvesting crystals we pulled out of the prison structure? They're still resonating with psychic energy patterns, and when you combine that with the neurotropic compounds in the Zerion 7 fruits—" "Please tell me," I said weakly, "that you're not planning to use alien prison technology and psychedelic fruit juice as weapons." "Commander Kynine," Marcus Webb replied, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "That's exactly what we're planning. Also, Buster wants to help." The next 20 minutes were spent watching the humans transform their science vessel into something that defied every principle of military engineering. They rigged the consciousness-harvesting crystals to the ship's communication array. They loaded the missile pods with sealed containers of what Marcus cheerfully called concentrated enlightenment. And somehow they convinced their alien pet to operate one of the targeting systems. "This is insane," muttered Prime Minister Keldon. "They're going to attack a fleet of dreadnoughts with fruit juice and stolen prison technology. And a tiger," Dr. Torres added, helpfully. "Don't forget Buster, he's very good at target acquisition." The hegemony fleet reached bombardment range with 5 minutes to spare, their weapon systems powered up with the whine of charging capacitors, and targeting beams painted Nexus Station like the crosshairs of impending doom. On the tactical displays, we watched 17 dreadnoughts prepare to reduce our home to cosmic dust. That was when the Meridian Hope dropped out of stealth mode directly in the middle of the enemy formation. "Attention, Hegemony Fleet," Jake Mitchell's voice broadcast on all frequencies, somehow managing to sound both polite and absolutely unhinged. "This is the human vessel Meridian Hope. We're here to discuss your warranty." "What warranty?" Supreme Commander Duran's reply was sharp with confusion and growing anger. "The warranty on your continued existence," Amy Chen replied sweetly. "Unfortunately, it's about to expire." What happened next would go down in military history as either the most brilliant tactical maneuver ever executed or the most successful application of weaponized insanity ever recorded. The humans launched their modified missiles, not at the dreadnought's hulls or weapon systems, but directly at their shield generators. The consciousness-harvesting crystals, still resonating with psychic energy, made contact with the hegemony shield arrays and created what Marcus would later describe in his technical report as a localized reality distortion field with strong hallucinogenic properties. Suddenly, 17 of the galaxy's most feared warships found themselves crewed by beings who were experiencing what could only be described as enforced enlightenment. Their tactical displays started showing philosophical concepts instead of targeting data. Their weapons systems began firing rainbow-colored energy beams that somehow convinced nearby asteroids to start singing opera. And their crews discovered what it felt like to experience the universe from the perspective of every living thing they'd ever killed. Supreme War Commander Vasque Duran's second transmission was significantly different from his first. "Oh gods," his voice crackled over the comm thick with tears and existential revelation. "I can feel everything. The suffering, the fear. What have we become? What have I become?" "Someone in need of therapy," Amy replied gently. "But first you're going to power down your weapons and surrender peacefully. Trust me, it'll be part of your healing process." The surrender took approximately 14 minutes. 17 dreadnoughts and their escort vessels powered down their weapons, lowered their shields, and transmitted unconditional surrender codes, while their crews underwent what military psychologists would later classify as aggressive emotional rehabilitation. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Galactic Alliance forces moved to secure the surrendering vessels, while the humans worked frantically to reverse the effects of their improvised consciousness weapons. Most of the hegemony crews recovered within a few hours, though they showed marked improvements in empathy, environmental consciousness, and what Dr. Torres described as basic decency. Supreme War Commander Duran himself underwent the most dramatic transformation. When the effects wore off, he requested political asylum and immediately began drafting surrender terms for the entire hegemony military. His first official act was to apologize to every species his forces had ever attacked, followed by detailed plans for reparations and peaceful coexistence. "This is unprecedented," Chancellor Arcturian said, his stress molt finally subsiding. "In 4 hours the humans have neutralized the greatest military threat in known space using fruit juice and the power of enforced self-reflection." Admiral Thorne was still staring at the tactical displays in disbelief. "Dr. Torres, how did your students know this would work?" She shrugged. "They didn't. They just figured that if consciousness harvesting technology was designed to extract awareness, it might also be able to force expanded awareness, add some psychoactive compounds to increase neural plasticity. And you've got a weapon that doesn't destroy enemies so much as help them become better people. And if it hadn't worked, then they would have tried something else. Humans are remarkably good at improvisation under pressure. It's one of our more endearing survival traits." Prime Minister Keldon, who had finally settled on a healthy shade of blue, raised a tentative question. "Dr. Torres, what happens now? With the hegemony threat neutralized and human capabilities proven, where does this leave the galaxy?" Dr. Torres considered this for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Well, I suppose that depends on what you want to accomplish. My students are already talking about their next project. Something about exploring the galactic rim and seeing if they can make friends with the entities that live in dark matter." The assembly fell silent. Through the viewports we could see the captured hegemony fleet hanging in space like monuments to the impossibility of human logic. In the distance, the Meridian Hope was already plotting courses to previously unexplored regions of space. "Dr. Torres," I said slowly, "perhaps we should discuss establishing formal protocols for human exploration activities." "Oh, absolutely," she agreed. Though I should probably mention that Jake's already sent applications to your xenoarchaeology department, Amy's been accepted to 3 different biological research programs, and Marcus is planning to open the galaxy's first interdisciplinary school for applied impossible studies. And Buster, she said with obvious pride, has been offered a position as Director of Interspecies Relations. He's remarkably good at making first impressions. As if on cue, the comm crackled with the sound of something that might have been purring. If purring could somehow convey complex diplomatic concepts and genuine affection for all sentient life. The position comes with full diplomatic immunity, Dr. Torres added, and an unlimited supply of those purple fruits. He's developed quite a taste for them. I looked around the council chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, all of them trying to process the fact that their reality had been fundamentally altered by 12 college students, some fruit and a tiger with a graduate degree in friendship. Dr. Torres, Chancellor Arcturian said finally, perhaps you could provide us with some guidance on how to coexist with humanity going forward. Her smile was warm and genuine, and absolutely terrifying. Chancellor, the secret to coexisting with humans is simple. We're curious, we're stubborn, and we believe that every problem has a solution if you're creative enough to find it. Point us at something impossible and we'll either solve it or befriend it or turn it into something useful. And if we encounter something that can't be solved, befriended, or turned useful, then we'll get creative. And trust me, you really don't want to see humans get creative. Outside the viewports, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, unchanged and eternal. But something fundamental had shifted in the galaxy. Humanity had announced its presence not with conquest or domination, but with fruit juice, friendship, and a profound belief that the universe was a problem waiting to be solved. The age of human exploration was about to begin, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, ancient intelligences that had slumbered for eons stirred at the sound of laughter echoing across the void. Part 3 was coming, and this time the humans wouldn't just be dealing with deathworlds and military fleets. This time they'd be meeting the things that scared the dark. 6 months after the hegemony surrender, I found myself aboard the Meridian Hope watching Jake Mitchell attempt to teach quantum physics to a sentient nebula while Amy Chen held what appeared to be a philosophical debate with a cluster of dark matter entities. This, according to Dr. Torres, was just another Tuesday in deep space exploration. The galactic rim had always been considered the edge of civilized space. Beyond it lay the deep dark, a region where reality became negotiable and the laws of physics turned into polite suggestions. Ancient legends spoke of entities that existed between dimensions, beings so alien that merely observing them could drive lesser minds to madness. Naturally, the humans wanted to make friends with them. Commander Kane, Dr. Torres said, joining me at the observation deck. You look troubled. I gestured toward the main viewport, where impossible geometries twisted through space like living mathematics. Dr. Torres, we're currently surrounded by entities that predate galactic civilization by millions of years. Beings that exist partially outside our reality, and your students are treating this like a cultural exchange program. Because it is, she replied matter-of-factly. Jake's made remarkable progress with the Void Singers. It turns out they've been trying to communicate with physical reality for eons, but nobody ever thought to listen with proper mathematical appreciation. Through the transparent aluminum I could see Jake floating in his environmental suit near a congregation of what our sensors could only describe as luminous impossibilities. They were beautiful and terrifying, like frozen music given form and consciousness. According to our instruments, they existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and communicated through manipulations of space-time itself. Jake was apparently explaining calculus to them using finger puppets. And Amy? I asked, though I was afraid to know. Oh, she's having a wonderful time with the Shadow Collective. They're a hive mind that exists in the spaces between atoms. Very philosophical. They've been debating the nature of existence for approximately 3 million years. And Amy just introduced them to the concept of ice cream. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of impossibility. After the hegemony incident, the humans had been granted unlimited exploration privileges by a galactic council that was equal parts grateful and terrified. The Meridian Hope had been upgraded with the best technology available, crewed with volunteers from across the galaxy, and sent to investigate anomalies that had baffled scientists for generations. The results had been educational. They'd made first contact with 17 previously unknown species, solved 3 cosmic mysteries that had puzzled philosophers for millennia, and somehow convinced a race of energy beings to help with improvements to galactic communication networks. Along the way, they'd also adopted what Marcus cheerfully called a modest collection of cosmic pets, including Buster the Tiger, a juvenile star that Amy had named Sparkles, and something that might have been a living equation with attachment issues. Dr. Torres, I said carefully. The entities we're currently encountering represent forces that shaped the early universe. They're not just alien, they're fundamentally incompatible with our reality. What makes you think communication is even possible? She smiled that terrifying smile. The Commander, remember what I told you about human survival strategy? When in doubt, try making friends. If that doesn't work, get creative. That was when the alarms started again. But these weren't the familiar warning tones of enemy ships or system failures. These were new alarms, ones that our computer systems had apparently invented specifically for our current situation. They sounded like mathematical equations having anxiety attacks. Contact from the deep dark, announced our communications officer, a Keldan named Rax, who had volunteered for this mission specifically because he thought humans were fascinatingly insane. Multiple entities approaching at impossible speeds. They're singing. The main screen flickered with readings that hurt to look at directly. Massive forms were materializing from the deep dark entities so vast that calling them ships would be like calling a hurricane weather. They moved through space like living palms, their forms shifting between states of matter that hadn't been discovered yet. Those are the ancient ones, whispered Dr. Yana Frost, our xenobiologist, her tentacles curling with terror. The firstborn. The beings that existed before matter learned to be solid. Marcus Webb's voice crackled over the comm from his laboratory. Oh wow, these readings are incredible. They're not just multidimensional, they're omnidimensional. They exist in every possible reality simultaneously. Also, I think they're really angry about something. The lead entity materialized fully into our reality, and I understood why lesser civilizations had classified the deep dark as forbidden space. It was beautiful in the way that cosmic forces are beautiful, terrible in the way that eternity is terrible. Looking at it was like trying to comprehend infinity while standing at the edge of forever. When it spoke, reality rippled. Who disturbs the eternal silence? Who brings noise to the spaces between thoughts? The voice wasn't heard so much as experienced, each word rewriting local physics and causing our instruments to display readings in languages that hadn't been invented yet. Several crew members fainted. I'm pretty sure I lost consciousness for a few seconds myself. Jake Mitchell's voice responded with cheerful enthusiasm. Hi there, I'm Jake. This is Amy and we're here to learn about your amazing dimensional manipulation techniques. Also, would you like to try some chocolate? It's really good. The silence that followed lasted approximately 17 seconds. I know because our temporal sensors recorded them as some of the longest 17 seconds in local space-time. Chocolate. The entity replied, and this time its voice carried notes of confusion rather than cosmic wrath. Oh yes, Amy Chen's voice joined the conversation. It's this wonderful food from our homeworld. It releases endorphins and makes everything better. We brought lots to share. What followed was the strangest first contact protocol in galactic history. The humans, displaying their characteristic disregard for self-preservation, convinced one of the ancient ones to try chocolate. The entity, apparently lacking any previous experience with biochemical pleasure responses, underwent what could only be described as a massive philosophical crisis. This sensation, it announced, space-time rippling with wonder. It is pleasant. How is pleasant possible? We have existed for eons without pleasant. That's terrible, Amy replied with genuine sympathy. You've been missing out on so much. Wait until you try pizza. The next few hours played out like a cosmic comedy written by beings with a very strange sense of humor. The ancient ones, these forces of primal creation that had shaped the universe before stars learned to shine, discovered emotion. Specifically, they discovered the joy of new experiences, the pleasure of friendship, and an inexplicable fascination with human cuisine. This is unprecedented, Dr. Yuna whispered, her instruments registering energy patterns that shouldn't exist. They're giggling. Cosmic entities older than galaxies are giggling about ice cream flavors. Marcus had emerged from his lab wearing what could only be described as a grin of scientific ecstasy. "Commander, you need to see these readings." When the Ancient Ones experience positive emotions, they literally reshape reality around them. They're not just happy, they're making happiness a fundamental force of the universe. That was when things got complicated. From the deepest regions of the dark came something else. Something that made the Ancient Ones look like friendly neighborhood pets. Our sensors couldn't measure it because it existed in negative dimensions, spaces that reality had specifically excluded from existing. When it spoke, the voice carried the weight of entropy itself. Enough. The single word hit our reality like a sledgehammer made of concentrated despair. The stars dimmed. Local space-time developed what our instruments could only classify as existential depression. Several crew members began questioning the fundamental nature of hope. "The Ancient Ones have been corrupted," the entity continued, its presence causing reality to develop what Marcus would later describe as aggressive nihilism. "They have forgotten their purpose. They must be cleansed." What materialized from the negative dimensions was the antithesis of everything. Where the Ancient Ones were beautiful in their impossibility, this entity was perfectly, absolutely nothing. It existed as a whole in reality shaped like despair and given the power to unmake things. "Oh," Dr. Torres said quietly, "that's not good." The entity, which our computers immediately classified as the end of fun, began its work with methodical precision. Where its influence touched, the giggling Ancient Ones fell silent. Their newfound joy drained away like color bleeding from a painting, leaving them gray and empty and purposeless. "Return to the silence," it commanded. "Remember your duty to the void." That was when Jake Mitchell did something that would be remembered in cosmic history as either the bravest or the most foolish act ever recorded. He put on his environmental suit, loaded his pockets with chocolate and emergency rations, and flew directly toward the entity of absolute negation. "Jake, no!" Amy's voice crackled over the comm. "Jake, yes," he replied cheerfully. "Marcus, start recording. I'm about to attempt diplomatic contact with the physical manifestation of existential dread." What followed challenged every assumption about the nature of good and evil, creation and destruction, hope and despair. Jake flew up to an entity that could erase galaxies with a thought and offered it a sandwich. "You look like you're having a really bad day," he said, conversationally. "Want to talk about it?" The entity of pure negation paused in its work of unmaking joy. For a moment that lasted several subjective eternities, it focused its absolute attention on one small human floating in the void with a lunchbox and an inexplicable smile. "I cannot be reasoned with," it said, though something in its voice suggested uncertainty. "I am the end of all things, the silence that comes after." "Yeah, that sounds really lonely," Jake replied with genuine sympathy. "How long have you been doing this job?" "Since the beginning of time. And you've never taken a vacation? Never tried anything else? Dude, that's like the worst work-life balance in the universe." The conversation that followed was philosophical in the way that only humans can make philosophy. Practical, empathetic, and completely unconcerned with abstract theory. Jake didn't try to argue with the entity about its purpose or nature. Instead, he talked to it about job satisfaction, personal fulfillment, and whether maybe it might like to try something different for a change. "I mean," Jake said, unwrapping what appeared to be a peanut butter sandwich, "ending things is important work. Someone's got to do it. But maybe you could also try starting things. Creating instead of destroying. It's really satisfying, and the hours are way better." "Creation is not my function." Says who? This question, delivered with typical human directness, caused what our sensors recorded as a localized conceptual paradox. The entity of absolute ending had apparently never considered the possibility that it might have choices about its existence. Amy Chen chose that moment to join the conversation, floating up beside Jake with her own emergency supply of snacks and an expression of maternal concern that somehow worked even when directed at cosmic forces of destruction. "You know," she said gently, "you don't have to be alone out here. There's room for everyone in the universe. Even you." What happened next defied every law of physics, metaphysics, and basic logic. The entity of pure negation This force of absolute ending that had existed since the birth of time experienced something it had never encountered before: genuine kindness offered without expectation of return. The results were spectacular. Reality hiccuped. Local space-time developed what Marcus would later describe as aggressive optimism, and the entity itself began to change, its perfect nothingness developing the first faint traces of something. "I do not understand," it said, and for the first time its voice carried notes of wonder rather than despair. "That's okay," Amy replied. "Understanding is overrated. Want some chocolate?" The transformation took approximately 6 hours and required the combined efforts of 12 human students, 17 ancient ones, one alien tiger, a sentient star, and something that might have been a living equation with attachment issues. When it was over, the entity of absolute ending had become something new. The universe's first cosmic therapist, dedicated to helping other beings work through their existential issues. "This is impossible," Dr. Yenna whispered, her instruments recording energy patterns that suggested reality was having the best day ever. "They've convinced entropy to become constructive. They've turned the heat death of the universe into a career counselor." "The feeling," announced the former entity of ending, its voice now warm with discovery. "It is good. We wish to experience more good." "And you will?" Dr. Torres assured it. "The universe is full of good things. Sunrises and music and friendship and the feeling you get when you help someone. You've got eternity to explore them all." The Ancient Ones, their joy restored and amplified by their new friend's transformation, began reshaping local reality into something resembling a cosmic celebration. Stars rearranged themselves into congratulatory patterns. Nebulae took on festive colors, and somewhere in the distance, a small planet that had been scheduled for heat death found itself spontaneously developing life instead. "Commander Kane," Marcus said, emerging from his lab with readings that looked like they'd been written by mathematicians having the best day ever. "I think we need to update our understanding of cosmic forces. According to these calculations, the universe just became approximately 47% more optimistic." I stared out at the impossible scene before us. Ancient entities, older than galaxies, were playing what appeared to be a cosmic game of tag with human students. Reality itself seemed lighter, as if some fundamental weight had been lifted from the foundations of existence. "Dr. Torres," I said slowly, "how did they do it? How did 12 human students convince the forces of creation and destruction to become friends?" She smiled that warm, terrifying smile one last time. "A humander. Remember what I told you about human survival strategy. When faced with something impossible, we either solve it, befriend it, or find a way to make it useful. In this case, we did all three. And the secret? There is no secret. Humans just refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. We see entropy and think that could be more efficient. We meet cosmic forces of destruction and think they look lonely. We encounter problems that have existed since the beginning of time and think, well, someone should probably fix that." The Meridian Hope began its journey back to civilized space, but we weren't traveling alone. The Ancient Ones had decided to visit the inner galaxy, curious to experience civilization now that they understood concepts like fun and friendship. The former entity of ending had requested a transfer to the Galactic Mental Health Department, where it planned to specialize in helping beings work through their fear of change. And Buster, our diplomatic tiger, had somehow convinced the sentient star to consider a career in atmospheric lighting for inhabited planets. "Dr. Torres," I asked as we watched the stars wheel past, "what happens now? Your students have fundamentally altered the nature of cosmic forces. Where does humanity go from here?" She considered this for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Well, Jake's been reading about something called the multiverse. Apparently there are infinite realities out there, and some of them might not be having as much fun as they could be." "And Amy?" "Amy's been corresponding with some kind of living math. Equations that exist independently of reality. She thinks they might be lonely and could use some friends." "And Marcus?" "Marcus," she said with obvious pride, "has been accepted to the Cosmic University. He's going and study applied impossible studies with a focus on making friends with things that shouldn't exist." I looked around the bridge of the Meridian Hope, where human students worked alongside alien scientists. Ancient ones shared hot chocolate with former forces of destruction, and a tiger with a graduate degree in diplomacy was apparently teaching quantum mechanics to a star. Dr. Torres, I said finally, I think I'm beginning to understand why the universe needed humans. Oh? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Because before you arrived, the cosmos was taking itself too seriously. It needed someone to point out that even fundamental forces of nature could probably use a friend and a good meal. Her laugh was warm and bright and somehow made the stars seem closer. Commander, I think you're ready for advanced human philosophy. Which is, when faced with the impossible, don't ask how can this be done. Ask who wants to help. The universe is a lot more cooperative when you remember that everyone, even cosmic entities older than time, just wants to be included. As the Meridian Hope sailed through space toward home, I reflected on everything I'd witnessed. 3 cycles ago, I'd watched 12 human students walk into the most dangerous place in known space. They'd emerged not just alive, but having made the galaxy a fundamentally better place. They'd turned a survival test into a rescue mission, a military crisis into a diplomatic triumph, and cosmic forces of destruction into the universe's most enthusiastic therapy group. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, I realized, was exactly what it had needed all along. Behind us, the deep dark was no longer dark. Ancient entities had decided that stars were prettier than void, and the edge of reality now sparkled with cosmic optimism. Ahead of us lay infinite possibilities, countless worlds to explore, and undoubtedly more impossible situations for humans to resolve through applied friendship and strategic kindness. I wouldn't have it any other way. The universe, as it turned out, had been waiting for someone to show it how to smile, and humans, with their inexplicable ability to make friends with anything and their absolute refusal to accept defeat, were exactly what the cosmos had ordered. Even if it hadn't known to ask,